All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a really intense situation that's unfolding in Iran, and it all kicked off with a pretty chilling and, let's be honest, unusually blunt warning from the US State Department. So we're going to break down what's going on, why it's happening now, and what could happen next.
I mean, look at that. That wasn't a friendly suggestion or a gentle piece of advice. This was an urgent, all-caps command from the U.S. State Department to its citizens. A message that direct? Well, it signals that the perceived danger has just skyrocketed. It's really the starting pistol for this whole crisis.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll dig into that warning itself. Then we'll look at the chaos inside Iran that's feeding this fire. After that, we'll get into the tough spot the U.S. is in and the options on the table. And finally, we'll zoom out and see why this matters to, well, pretty much everyone.
Okay, Section 1. Let's really focus on this official advisory. This isn't your typical exercise caution travel notice. The words they chose to use are incredibly important, and they tell you just how seriously the U.S. government is taking this. And there it is. The key message is basically, figure out your own way out. The government is telling its people they need an exit plan that has nothing to do with official help. What does that mean? It means in a worst-case scenario, there might not be an embassy to run to, there might not be an organized evacuation. It's a very clear signal that says you're on your own.
Right. So a warning this severe doesn't just pop up out of a vacuum. It's happening for a reason. And that reason is the immense and frankly growing pressure inside Iran. The regime there is being squeezed from all sides.
An expert analysis from our source material paints a really grim picture. Just look at this list. The regime is completely boxed in. You've got massive protests, which are being met with internet and communication blackouts. The economy is in what's being called a freefall. They're facing shortages of basics like water. And all of this is being crushed under the weight of international sanctions. It's a perfect storm.
And this turmoil comes at a tragic human cost. President Trump has actually stated, citing intelligence, that the regime's crackdown has killed hundreds of its own citizens who were protesting. That level of violence, it just shows you how desperate the government is to keep its grip on power.
But here's the thing. Despite that brutal violence, the spirit of the protesters is being described as just awe-inspiring. Think about that. People are reportedly willing to risk their lives for a future they might not even live to see. That kind of resolve, that is a powerful and totally unpredictable force that the regime is clearly struggling to control.
So you've got this powder keg inside Iran. What is the U.S. position in all of this? Well, it's complicated. The administration is trying to navigate this really tricky dynamic where what's being said out in the open is very different from what's being whispered behind closed doors.
And this right here is the crucial disconnect. Publicly, the Iranian regime is putting on a brave face, all defiance and strength. But behind the scenes, the reports say they're sending private messages to the U.S., saying they actually want to negotiate an end to these crippling sanctions. That tells you just how much that internal pressure is really hurting them.
And the U.S. response? It kind of mirrors this two-sided situation. President Trump has been clear that, hey, talking is always the first choice. Diplomacy is the goal. But that offer to talk is backed by a very real, very unambiguous threat of military force if it comes to that. It's a classic carrot-and-stick approach.
So this all leads to some incredibly heavy decisions that have to be made by the president and his top security officials. What are the actual concrete options on the table right now? According to the analysis in our source, it really boils down to three main paths, and each one is a step up in intensity. First, there's the military option, a direct strike on the IRGC facilities that are being used to crush the protests. Second, a non-military route. Give direct help to the protesters to help them organize and communicate. And the third option is to just keep tightening the economic screws, going after countries that are still doing business with Iran.
So why does any of this matter outside of the immediate crisis? Well, because a real fundamental change in Iran wouldn't just stay in Iran. It would send shockwaves across the entire Middle East and honestly probably across the whole world. The stakes here are incredibly high for everyone.
And this is it. This is the ultimate question being asked by the expert in our source material. After decades of trying to change the regime's behavior with deals and sanctions and everything in between, the conversation is shifting. People are now asking, is the only way to get real lasting change to change the regime itself?
Wow, I mean, that is a direct and really blunt assessment from the expert. This point of view comes from Iran's long history as a state sponsor of terror, funneling money and weapons to groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis in Yemen.
So from this perspective, Iran isn't just a problem in the region, it's the problem.
Which brings us to this key argument, that the regime and its destructive actions are all tied together, like a giant tangled knot. The thinking goes that you can't solve the problems of their nuclear program or their support for terror groups without just cutting the knot altogether. And that means addressing the very nature of the regime itself.
And that leaves us with this final, absolutely critical question. This is the one that could decide Iran's future. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGCs, they are the regime's iron fist. They're the ones cracking down. But if the pressure keeps building, if the country keeps crumbling, will that loyalty hold? That, right there, is the wild card that you can bet intelligence agencies everywhere are watching more closely than anything else.